Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklen podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. This is the third step in pre-reading a book. We're following Mortimer Adler's steps in analytical reading from his very well-known book, How to Read a Book. And we are in the pre-reading phase of this and taking it through onto cards that will go into our Zettelkasten. It's the natural companion to this book, and what a joy to be able to actually follow his methods through a complete example. I'm using the book Hold On, You Lost Me by Bernice McCarthy and Janine O'Neill Blackwell, and I invite you to choose a book that you would like to read analytically and work alongside me. We're on step 3, where we're going to be looking at the index to find key terms, and then after having done that, we're going to see if we can determine the range of topics that are covered by the book. So come on over to the down-facing camera, and I'll show you what I've done for this step. All right, so here we are. I'm using my bib cards on a ring to follow the steps in How to Read a Book. And here we are in step 3. Check out the index for the range of topics covered and begin picking out key terms. Boy, did I ever have fun with this exercise, although at first I thought it was going to drive me a little batty. I began with this index, and it's very well organized. I noticed that we have a lot of header topics, and that usually will clue you in to which terms are a key term for the author. And then when I look at this one and I see the word definition there, that definitely tells me that the author is going to be using this term in a very specific technical way. So quite naturally, I had to put down analysis as one of the terms. But the first one I put down was this format model, because it seems to pop up everywhere. And that was definitely going to be a key term for the author. So then I just kind of started writing the terms down as I went. And it started to make me realize that, wow, I've got assessment, and I've got step, and stage. And it's like, whoa, what is going on here? And I began to feel as though I were looking at material that had organization to it that was not going to be captured alphabetically. So rather than waiting to feel just totally overwhelmed and stacking up card after card after card with lots of terms, I began to track the things that had multiple terms. So in particular, I noticed that there were a number of terms that came in 4s. There were different kinds of questions: why, how, if, what, each type of question, and 4 kinds of learners: imaginative, common sense, dynamic, analytic. And so I thought they had to go together. So I snuck over to the reference pages, and yes, I was able to line up the individual learners with their question. One thing I just had to really laugh, because the author said that you will fall into one of these types of questions as being the most common question that you ask yourself, and that's going to be your learning style. As soon as I saw this how-to, I had to think back immediately to the taglines that I wrote for what I expected to get out of each chapter. And how could you miss how to? 3 guesses as to what my learning style might be. And then I noticed something, which is that this author covers everything back again in terms of how your learning style affects how you teach when you become the trainer. So I thought that was really interesting, because you're going to naturally want to teach using the style that you learn best by. So it's going to take a little bit of stretching to be able to teach to all of the different types of learning style, which is, of course, the whole reason why I'm reading this book. The other thing that seemed to come in 4s was the phases. There seem to be 4 phases, which are referred to more as quadrants in the text itself. You don't really see the word phases showing up very much, but there are 4 clear phases that represent quadrants in the diagrams, and they're always shown with this diagram form, and they never use the word phase, but this is how they draw them, and they make up parts of a circle. And the other thing that confused me going through the index was that there were 4 phases, but there are 8 steps, 8 learning steps in the learning cycle. And so I had to figure out, and it wasn't too hard to figure it out, thanks to page references, of course, that each of the 4 phases has 2 steps. And I jotted down the name of each step, but I didn't bother worrying about knowing the definition of the phases and knowing the definition of the steps, because of course that's what I'm going to get when I actually read the book. So as I figured out where each of these terms that I was coming up with fit in the greater design, I put this little symbol on it to let myself know that I had tracked it down. And when I was done tracking down the ones that I'd identified, all I had left was analysis versus synthesis. So I double-checked their definition, and they're talking about the 2 sides of the mind, and then 2 kinds of assessment. And there might be more because the assessment seems to be a chapter in and of itself. Other terms that I discovered as I finished working through the index were 3 kinds of engagement: social, emotional, and physical, although this seems to come up near the end of the book. And then 3 places where learning comes in. Learning by itself, which is how do you learn, a learning method versus a learning style, and a learning cycle. I'd already figured out the learning cycle. It's those 4 phases, 8 steps, but I wondered whether learning method and learning style might just be synonyms. Turns out not so. When the author talks about learning methods, she's referring to techniques. When she talks about learning style, our learning preference in terms of which stage of the learning cycle we find ourselves most comfortable. Then, having gotten the most that I could out of which key terms I could find from the index, I was ready to answer the other part of the question, find the range of topics that are covered. I could do that from the top of my head based on what I had picked up studying the different key terms. The range of topics covers the format model itself, 4 different learning styles and how they impact your role as a trainer, the learning cycle itself, the 4 phases, each with their 2 steps, and how to design quality training using these pieces of information, plus information on delivery and assessment. And running throughout is this interplay of the learning style with the phases in the learning cycle. Right. Well, what did you think of that process of going through the index of your book and seeing what key terms popped out for you? I thought it was just amazing. I was able to play with it. I took it on like a game. What can I discover, like using the index as just like tidbits, like clues in a detective game? How could I determine what was the difference between a stage and a step? Why was I seeing those 2 terms and figuring out how that fell together? And I tried as much as possible not to cheat and look inside the book, but it did come to the point where I just had to figure out the difference between a phase and a stage, and I peaked. And a couple other places I did as well. But it was amazing how much I could actually learn about which terms were going to be essential and which ones were going to be related to the actual range of topics that the book covered just by looking at the index. I had a lot of fun. And once again, just like yesterday's process, it's making me more eager than ever to actually read this book. So come on back tomorrow and we'll continue this process. Bye-bye.